is a challenge. When you can't put gas in your car, when you can't buy food, you can't pay your light bill, or you can't pay your rent. Life is going on, life is happening, you know, and trying to put a Band-Aid and stop the bleeding on the effects of generational poverty. Investments in resources that are meant to get to these communities haven't gotten to them. There has to be economic warriors in the community to create economic justice.
Hey, what's going on, man? Everybody good?
My name is Arlo Washington, and my purpose in life is to advance equity, create opportunities, and build the community.
Had been the front line for Taiwan during the Chinese Civil War. But it was still a shock to see that China is literally right there. My mother casually reminded me that I should have a plan if China invades. We're gonna be too old to leave, she told me.
I love the violin.
I think a lot of people see a broken thing and they just think it's broken. It could be anything. Maybe it's public schools.
Or maybe it's the United States or any other part of the world.
Maybe it's just that $20 fiddle found at a swap meet.
But when we see a broken thing, we think, oh, with a little something here, a little something there, we can fix the part that's broken and make things whole again.
It's difficult work.
But no matter what,
you do whatever it takes because
fixing stuff is one of the best things that humans do.
That's why this is not just a musical instrument repair shop. When an instrument breaks, there's a student without an instrument. No, not in our city.
Even if they don't know me.
We know it could change their whole life.
我现在83岁了，我感觉我还像20岁。
我今年94岁，觉得都100岁，都很老了。
还可以互相照顾啊。
我们每天的生活没有什么特别的。
你知道我们今天要做什么吗？
今天跳舞。
4、2、3、4。
痛苦的过一天，跟快乐的过一天是同样的一天，所以我们要选择快乐。
怎么那么臭啊？大家有没有放屁啊？
没事来。
Thank you guys so much. What a treat. All of these films, right, everybody? Round of applause for this amazing filmmakers. So, from my perspective, it's always a special delight to have the short documentaries. We do this every year. We've done it for many years. because we're such fans of short films. In fact, we put on a shorts festival in the summer, and one of the winners was Nene and Weipo this summer, was the Audience Award winner. We like to call them early. But also, it seemed to me that these films share some themes, among them of equality and of opportunity, of family and community. These are things that just struck me as at the heart of so many of the stories that you guys told. And so there's lots of different threads that we're gonna pull on. Let's just start down at the end here with Christine and Arlo. Tell us about how this movie came about, The Barber of Little Rock. John, we may just throw a microphone at you at some point because we want to hear from you as well. We're just so fortunate to have you all here. Arlo, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So, Christine, why don't you tell us about sort of how the film came about and why you chose to tell this story?
So John and I wanted to make a film looking at the racial wealth gap. And in the course of our research, we came across a book called The Color of Money by a woman named Mirza Baradaran. And the book looks at how the black community has been systematically shut out of the American financial system. And in reading the book, we learned about something called Community Development Financial Institutions, CDFIs, like the one that Arlo runs, People Trust, in the film. And we thought, well, that could be really interesting if we were to embed in one of these places. Maybe this would be a way in which we could really be on the ground and sort of witness the people living the racial wealth gap, but also the people who are there addressing it and committed to narrowing it. And so we reached out to a woman named Donna Gambrell, who was the director of the CDFI fund under the Clinton administration. And she said, there's this guy named Arlo who has a on the parking lot of his Barber College, a converted shipping container with a loan fund. And you got to meet him. And of course, sure enough, we did, and we knew right then and there we had our subject.
So Arlo, when these two strangers rolled up, what did you think? Like, amazing opportunity to get broader, interest in what you're doing?
Yeah, I did. It was interesting that someone cared enough to make a film about it. It's something that the broader community didn't really think about because you don't have these conversations or talk about it a lot. And so for someone to come and say, hey, we want to make a film about the racial wealth gap and about your organization, I was like, wow, okay. So it was very interesting. It's increased the demand for our products and services, how we help people, let me say that. We've had more national attention. The CDFI industry is made up of about 1,500 CDFIs nationwide. And so that industry has really been, intrigued with the fact that our film has gotten nominated for an Oscar, and, CDFIs are the talk of, a lot of social media platforms like LinkedIn. And so it's just been a lot of attention. And I was even talking about, when I go in a grocery store now, it's kind of like, hey, I saw you in the I'm like, oh. But we never did it for TV. We do it because this is what we emerged out of an unmet credit need, and it was what our community needed. And so I've always been solutions driven, and this was something that that's why we put the shipping container on the parking lot, because we just needed a place to make access to capital happen.
Well, where there's a will, there's a way, I guess. Really. Another very hopeful and inspiring film is your film, Kris Bowers, that you made with Ben Proudfoot. Many of us know Kris's work as a composer, but you're also the producer and the director of this film. By the way, that beautiful score is just incredible I hope they let you play it at the Oscars. That would be amazing. If you could bring the LAUSD team together. I'm sure the producers have thought of it. But how did you stumble across this? Because you have a full-time job as a movie composer.
Yeah, so thank you all for coming. Also, thank you for being here. So my co-director, Ben, got an article from one of our producers, Jeremy Lambert. His brother's a luthier. He makes guitars and string instruments. And he sent Jeremy this article about the repair shop. And so Ben got a hold of it, and he immediately was fascinated by this idea of the North Pole of musical instruments, essentially. And this was over 4 years ago. And Ben and I were working on another film about my grandfather called A Concerto's a Conversation. And Ben was like, "You're from LA, you went to LAUSD schools, you must know about this repair shop." And for me, I was so surprised I never heard of it, but I also never thought of it. Like, I've been playing piano since I was 4, and the music rooms in my schools were always like the place that I went to work through emotions or process things. I felt like there are certain things I couldn't process verbally, whether it was anger or depression or sadness or anxiety, and that piano became this safe space for me to be able to do that. And so I did that from the time I was very young in elementary school all the way through high school and beyond. But I never thought about how those instruments were always kept in good condition. And so for me, I just was so excited about meeting these people and in a sense, thanking them for their part in doing that, and actually ended up meeting Steve Bagmani, and the piano technician, tuned the pianos at my elementary school and middle school. And so it became a very literal thank you to someone who had a hand in that. But yeah, we just went down there, and what's also really amazing is Ben kind of gave this rousing speech to the technicians because they were a little hesitant about having anybody come in. And the 4 people that volunteered to be interviewed are the 4 people in the film. So there's never any sort of interview process. We just happened to have these amazing stories come to us. And so really, once we did those interviews and then talked to Ben about interviewing the kids, and we put together that last piece like maybe 5 or 6 weeks before we finished the whole thing. So it went from, again, over 4 years ago up until last summer when we finished it.
I would have thought if you were trying to tell the story of the repair shop, as a storyteller myself, journalist, I would have thought you'd probably want to tell the stories of the students and how the instruments might have changed their lives, which is, of course, part of the story. But what's, I think, so amazing about the film is that you discover the people who repair the instruments themselves have these unbelievable stories to tell about their lives. Did you stumble across that, or did you find, were you intentional about making them the characters?
Yeah, that was very intentional. It was actually a long back and forth with Ben about whether or not we would have kids in it at all. For a while, we actually were thinking about maybe not having kids in it. So it was always about the technicians, just because, we know oftentimes the incredible, artists or stars that come out of a city, but we never know about, the village that really made them possible. And so I think for us, it was really about turning a spotlight on these people that work literally in the shadows and have a hand in like every single, this shop has been around since 1959. So generations of musicians, which is what that end piece is meant to represent, have benefited from this repair shop. And, we, since making it, we've gone down to City Hall, and we've been down to the LAUSD school board meetings to have them recognize the technicians. And some of those people didn't even realize that this repair shop was still around, and we're very thankful to find out, but they assumed with all the budget cuts, especially to the arts, that went away a while ago. And so for us, it was also just a way for us to really be proud of what LA has and really show to the city something that we have that is really special that a lot of other cities, almost all other cities don't have, and to really celebrate that, to be prideful about it.
Did you like directing, since this is your first directing
This
project?
is second. So yeah, Ben and I made
the concerto, the other short.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, this was definitely a bit more hands-on for me. The last one was more about, because it was like kind of my story, my grandfather's story, and I interviewed my grandfather. But this one was much more like Ben and I, in the edit room together, and us, storyboarding together and things like that. But the thing that I love about Ben, I grew up as a jazz pianist, and he grew up as a sleight of hand magician. And so we both come from this background of improvisation, and where that leads to is that, between having that background and both of us having these people's stories be the North Star for what we're trying to serve becomes this yes and process where, you know, if I have an idea, Ben is like, yeah, let's try that. And then we can viscerally or instinctively tell whether or not it's going to serve that North Star, and vice versa. If Ben has an idea, then I'm immediately like, yeah, let's try that. And I think that improvisatory background and Ben's love for music and his ability to explain things to me in musical ways, I think definitely makes me fall in love with this process for sure.
Trish, let's talk about the ABCs of book banning. Why were you drawn to this? This is obviously a huge issue that's getting worse and worse every day. It is not getting better at this moment in time.
Well, I was in touch with Sheila Nevins, and we'd been talking about book banning, and then Sheila Nevins gets up every morning at 7 a.m. and watches TikTok. And she saw Grace Lynn, who's sitting before us, 101-year-old Grace Lynn activist, speaking before her Martin County School Board. I'd worked with Sheila on many projects.
Got it. Okay.
Prior, and she was getting another film about the high exorbitant cost of insulin out, and we'd been in touch, and she called me, and so she really felt strongly. She's a red diaper baby, and she thought this was just abhorrent that the book banning was going on, and we didn't realize to the degree it is. But when I got to Florida and I met Grace, we started talking, and then we met a lot of Florida families and kids. And then we started getting in touch with PEN America and the ACLU and the National Coalition Against Censorship. And currently, there's 6,000 books banned in 41 states. When we finished the film in August 2023, there were 2,000. So the rate is rapid. And really, the people that are banning the books, they do it under the guise that it's sexually explicit material. But when we look at what the majority of the books are comprised of, it's really LGBTQ+, Black history, women's rights, the Holocaust, anything that the right, white Christian, they don't really want children to be exposed to. And so it's even in the state of Massachusetts in mid-December, a police officer went into a middle school, looking for the book Genderqueer. And that teacher has taken a permanent leave of absence. So this is really affecting teachers. In some states, it's a felony for a librarian or a teacher. And even in the state of Pennsylvania, to have a banned book, state of Tennessee rather, to have a banned book in the classroom, library, and the bookseller, and if your kid goes to someone's house for a play date and that family has the banned book, they can be charged with a felony.
What?
Yes, it was just passed in the state of Tennessee recently. I was just on the phone the other day with PEN America discussing it with them because they hadn't heard about it. So it's quite alarming what's happening because it's an assault on literature. And many of the kids, as you see in the film, are so precocious and so aware of the world they live in. But other kids were also saying, should we be afraid of these books? Is there something bad about them that we shouldn't, be looking at them? Is there a reason why our teachers and our school communities don't want us to have them? And I grew up, my brother came out in the late 80s, and fortunately we had progressive, loving parents. But if we did, my brother needed access to a book like In Tango Makes Three so he could accept his identity. That would be critical because if he didn't have access to books, he might not be here today. So these books are vitally important for children. There's no threat to them. I mean, we're getting all kinds of threats, like we're pedophiles, we're getting death threats for making the film because we're standing against this injustice, and books should really be available. So I wish that the people banning the books were as sophisticated and mature as the children in the film that you see.
Yeah. The children in the film have a complete clarity and awareness of A, what they're being denied, B, what the likely outcome is, and C, how completely self-defeating the whole idea of book banning is. But it feels like it's not. We're going to lose more ground on this before something changes, right? I mean, these laws continue to be passed, and more books keep getting put on the lists.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot we can do. I mean, I think that, yes, there are organizations called Moms of Liberty. They're very much in support of Donald Trump and the MAGA mindset, and so they have chapters in every state, multiple chapters. I think we have to get involved in our local communities and school boards and support PEN America, support the ACLU, all the organizations I'm mentioning. It takes a while to get back to the First Amendment. You know, these school districts hire independent contractors to come in and review the books. It only takes one objection for any arbitrary reason. A parent could say, I don't want my kid reading about Rosa Parks. They take it out of circulation. Rosa Parks, one of the banned books. The book of Martin Luther King. Harvey Milk's story is banned. The list goes on and on. It's shocking knowing that at this day and
Also,
age.
books that have been on reading lists like The Diary of Anne Frank for 50 years.
Yes.
And suddenly it's dangerous. It's just absurd on its face. Anyway, we'll talk more about the film, but thank you for being here. Thank you, Grace, for being here.
Yes. Grace. All right. She's our shero.
Absolutely. So, Sean, you're the director of Nene and Weipo. I just got to meet Sean in person at Sundance because his film also, his first feature film just won, is it the Audience Award at Sundance? So that film's called Dee Dee. Congrats for that. So he's been having quite a run the past few weeks. And Sam, who's the producer of the film, are here. Tell us about the making of this movie about your grandmothers. You're just needed to pull your camera out and follow them around. seems like but unlikely, right? Not usually what like a hip young filmmaker wants to make, like as a film.
I think my grandmothers are two of the most special women in my life. I think the whole film, the seed of the idea started in 2018. I had made a Christmas card with them, and I know their joy, their silliness.
And the Christmas card is not a Christmas card, it's a video.
It's a video. It's a 1-minute video where it starts off with the two of them dancing, and then Waipo tries to feed me blueberries, and I say, Waipo wo buya, which means Waipo, no. And she goes, eat. I say, no. And she's like, eat. I'm like, you're so annoying, no. And then she looks in the camera, slaps me across the face. I fall to the floor. She looks at Nai. They make eye contact, and they're like, you thinking what I'm thinking? And they're like, yeah. And then it cuts to this insane montage where they tie me up and slap me in the garage, and then they chug liquor and light stuff on fire, spank me, and then dig a hole in the backyard, bury me, and then it cuts to the two of them, and it says Happy Holidays. And it's like a 1-minute video. I shot it on a camcorder in 2018. I sent it to all my friends. I put it on Instagram. I sent it to people like production companies to like get a job. But it was the most fun.
Didn't get any jobs out of that.
I didn't get any jobs out of that. But it was a proof of concept in a weird way for this movie. And I think it was the most fun I ever had making anything. And I think Sam and I, we've worked together for almost a decade now. We've known each other for so long. He's often the first person to read anything I write if I have a seed of an idea for something.
How do you two know each other?
We both transferred to USC as juniors from community colleges, and it was sort of love at first sight. And we've been working together since. And I think we both knew there's something else here. We're not really sure what, but they're so special. They're so funny. There's so much life there. And in 2021, I had basically lived in New York City for about 5 or 6 years. And I decided to move back to Los Angeles to be closer to people like Sam and a lot of my collaborators that I, work with often. And in this sort of in-between period, I moved home to the Bay Area first. And it was the first time since leaving home that I spent, months underneath the same roof with my two grandmothers. And I sort of, for the first time, got to really live with them and see their quotidian, sort of the rhythms of their life and them reading the newspaper and sort of, really see them and dance with them and, sort of live life with them. And that was sort of, that coincided with a lot of anti-Asian hate crimes that were happening in our country at the time, but especially in the Bay Area, where I'm from. And I would literally go on the internet. There was like a New York Times article that said Fremont, California, and it was, about the anti-Asian hate crimes that are happening. And it was this extreme anger coupled with this extreme joy that I felt, living with them, seeing them, dancing with them. And additionally, I sort of had this thought that, or this feeling, that this period I have spending time with them is special. And when I leave home, when I eventually move out, I was really, it could be the last time I see Nai, because at that time she was 94 when we shot, and I could just really feel her fragility some days. every couple months.
Is she still with us?
She's still with us, and
Oh, well,
she was
there
at
you
the
go.
Oscars
Hey.
luncheon
She was just
today.
at the Oscars.
She was at the Oscar lunch
Yeah, she was at the nominees
They
luncheon.
both were.
Okay.
So
well, why
very
didn't she
grateful
come
for
today? I
that.
don't
But
understand.
you know, but
They got
it
a
was
little
that
tired. They're
feeling
taking a
of,
nap.
yeah, it was that feeling of just wanting to remember them, honor them, show, help people who were only really seeing the version of them, elderly people in our communities as victims, people who were headlines of the anti-Asian hate crimes, and humanize them in a way that captured my grandmother's spirits in a way that was joyful and silly and infectious and youthful, but without ignoring the pain and the loneliness and the mortality that I think comes with old age as well. And so Sam and I really like to sort of, when we were making it, it was like, can we make a film that explores those hard themes of end of life, mortality, death, pain, but infuse it with this childlike, youthful energy that comes from Nai Nai and Waipo. They're so infectious and joyful. So it was really that. Can we make a container that contained all of the multitudes of their sort of humanity?
Well, I think it would have been really easy to make a film about end of life. Sad.
Yes.
Depressing. And so like Sean said, what we saw in them was this sort of like child, despite being a combined 184 years old, we saw in them this very youthful spirit. And so, going back to the Christmas card that Sean made where they killed him and buried him in the backyard, we wanted to find a way to encapsulate that quality in them as well. And that's where the idea of these little skits kind of emerged. And the skits in the film there's something meta about it because it's obviously tongue-in-cheek. They're playing the game, and you're witnessing an experiment between a grandson making his grandmas feel seen, which is something that I think too few of us do for the older people in our communities. And the result of this experiment is this. And to have this film as a tribute to these women, but then for Disney Plus to come, and then for the Oscar nomination is obviously beyond our wildest dreams. And we felt like we had already won, having just made this sort of time capsule of these women that's like a home video, and that it's really for his family. If we knew somehow 3 years ago that we would be the only ones to ever see this film, we would have still made it, because in essence, that's what it's for. It's for them, and they'll always have that. So, yeah.
Now you're making me wonder what the budget was.
Very, very low, very low. It was me and Sean sleeping in his childhood bedroom, and
mom making dumplings for us for crafty. And like at the end of the day, it's for my grandmas, it's for my family. If someone is like, I don't like your movie, I'm like, well, I don't care. It's not for you. And I think ultimately that idea of making something that brushes up from anger, like the audience for this movie, even though it is like we wanted to honor them, it was a time capsule for us. And I think that was where the anger kind of, that was where the answer to the anger came from. It was, you guys are all wrong. I'm going to show you how special these people are. These people that like you're attacking in the headline, like I'm like, you get to know Nai Nai and Waipo, and like you imagine someone punching them in the face. That is insane. And so it was like, let's just show how joyful they can be, show how human they can be, and then that was kind of the North Star. And it was like, if you don't like them, I don't care. I don't like you.
That's a great frame and explanation. Thank you. So Jean, it's Leo, right? Okay. We've just met. Let's talk about Island in Between, which is very different in some ways from some of the other docs that are nominated. So this is a story that you wanted to tell because you're from this place.
I feel like some of my motivations actually in the film, you see me sort of visiting this place that is kind of a mythical place.
By the way, like how many of us have heard of this place before this film?
So if you look up the 1960 presidential debate between Nixon and Kennedy, they actually spent 5 minutes talking about this island. U.S. has been involved between Taiwan and China for, since World War II, right? And the debate was Kennedy saying, it's really stupid to put your military right at this really not defendable, is that the right term? Yes. Yeah. Island, why don't we retreat back to the main Taiwan island, have this bigger body of water as the natural barrier? And you have Nixon saying, we're not giving the commies a single inch of the free land. So that was, that was a debate in 1960. And now is 60 years later. So here we are.
Yeah, still unresolved. Yeah. Jean, how did you become involved in this, and sort of what was your role exactly?
Well, so Leo and we met about 10 years ago, and I've been working documentary for over 40 years. And when I met someone from Taiwan, and we don't even have to talk. There's we just know what we want, and we want to tell a story about Taiwan. And I don't think there's any film made about Taiwan by a Taiwanese. I was born in Taiwan. Leo was born in Taiwan. But Kinmen for me was, I was born in 61. In 1969, I was 8 years old. I remember the first time I saw my grandma cried when she picked up the phone from my uncle who got picked to serve in Kinmen. And so my generation came from mainland China after the Chinese Civil War. And Leo's family were the 9th generation of Taiwanese. But we all suffered in some way. And so at that time, for my uncle to get picked to go to Kinmen, it's like he may go die. It's like in the film, Leo's grandma also cried. And so that was my first memory of Kinmen. And then when Leo went to Kinmen with his parents during the pandemic, I said, what a great opportunity to show this mystical place that I grew up never been.
How many people live there? It's so small.
Actually about 40,000. So it's very rural, but it's not, deserted by any stretch. I don't know. In some ways, this film is a little bit of an existential crisis film for me. I mean, I was born and raised in Taiwan. I moved to the U.S. as a teenager, and I spent most of my adult life here. And I've actually felt very distant from Taiwan for a long time, sort of hearing stories from far away. But because of the last few years I've been back in Taiwan, it really kind of challenged my identity, of me being Taiwanese. I have, you see my passports, right, in the film. So I do feel like nationality is sort of a strange concept for me, and in many ways, that's what this film is about, sort of examining for somebody like me, like Jean also, who has multiple passports. I think she has exactly the same ones I do. So, not the third one. Actually, the third one now is just the ID card, because according to the Chinese government, this is your ID because you're actually Chinese, you're not Taiwanese, so this is your driver's license, or so anyway, I think that maybe that's one of the reasons why the film connected with audiences outside of the region and who might not know the region very well, because it really is about a sense of belonging, the definition of home, which I think all of us can relate to. Doesn't matter where we're from and what language you speak. So, but I actually want to shout out to Sean. This is a Taiwanese American. It's so, the Taiwanese people are so thrilled. You cannot imagine the media madness that's happening in Taiwan right now. So,
around him?
Well, yeah, just like both of our films.
Both your films. Yeah,
exactly. So.
Very cool. Well, you can go. That I would actually love to be a fly on a wall and sort of see what that is. That's super cool. Let's talk about making docs. Nobody gives you a bunch of money. Nobody writes you a big check. Nobody asks for this. The studio system doesn't need you for its pipeline. All of these kinds of films, all of these docs have to be labors of love and sacrifice. I'm gonna guess. So I'd love to hear from the filmmakers. What were the biggest challenges that you faced in making these films? Anybody can jump in who feels like they want to address it.
I think when we first started out, it was more observational film. That's what Leo's used to. And once we realized this film could be seen outside of Taiwan to international, we need to have some kind of guidance. And that's when Leo, I say, you have to put your self-story in it. And I know that that's not a comfortable place for him to be in. That was the challenge, but I think you did well.
I think for us also, the Taiwan Strait, it's so complicated that we needed to find a way to say it simple, but say it's emotional, say it very, visceral. Because it's like people don't want to be lectured about like history, politics. Like, somebody, Be Rich, who is my old boss at UC Santa Cruz and is this amazing film critic. She said this is like a geopolitical home movie, because geopolitical issues feels sort of newsy and sometimes people think it's dry, or if you're not interested in the region, you wouldn't care. But I think for us, we had to find a way to make it emotionally, able to be connecting to the audience.
For Barber of Little Rock, we were filming during COVID, and so we're making a verite observational film where we're on the ground. And so there was very much a sort of stop-start nature to production, which is a challenge for that kind of film. We were also filming in very confined spaces like the Barber College, for example, or the shipping container or the bank. And so we had to find, ways to sort of stop down again, start up, and, film in a very safe and responsible manner, but also maintain relationships with people who are already living quite precarious lives, and you add COVID on top of that, and it becomes another kind of challenge. And then I would say, in addition to that, Arlo's work is really multifaceted. He's doing so much. He's moving around. He's running the Barber College. He's running the loan fund. And we were just surprised to learn at how much he's doing that we didn't know, actually, when we initially landed on the ground and were ready to, start filming.
You mean in addition to those two things, or those two things?
Just the way in which, he's really a pillar in the community, and he's a mentor to so many. So he gives anybody who comes up to him the time of day, and he speaks with everyone, and he listens to everyone. And we were surprised by that, but that's also why we were so drawn to what he's doing. That's why his passion comes across so much in the film. So it was a challenge to keep up with Arlo, too. But we were happy to do so.
I really resonate with what kind of Jean said a minute earlier, where kind of finding comfort in discomfort. You're like putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation. And I think for us, Sam and I talk a lot about tone, as much as this movie is about joy and that silliness, that unbridled sort of infectious youthful energy. We didn't want to shy away from the pain of their lives and the loneliness and what it feels like to see your friends die. And how can we have a film that juggles both of those tones? How can you have a film where my grandmas are talking about farts and death? And ultimately, I think, in interviewing them, I realized, actually, Sam and I kind of talked about this recently, that as a grandson making the movie with them, it's the silliness and the joy and the skits, but to kind of get to kind of talk to them on a very human level, that is an uncomfortable place for me,
Truth, to speak the truth
it's
with
not
them.
this is not stuff we talk about at the dinner table.
Yeah.
And so I think that growth for me as a filmmaker, I realize is inextricably linked to my growth as a human, and being able to close that gap between grandson, grandmother, or even mother-son, these family dynamics that you have. When I bring filmmaking into the fold and family, it forces both of us to be okay, let's be vulnerable with each other. Let's kind of, because I want to be vulnerable with them. I want to close that gap. And so that was kind of a really challenging part for me, I guess, personally. But I think it was only great for, our own growth as family members.
We didn't want to make an investigative docu. We really wanted it to be about the kids' perspectives, as we say in the opening of the film. Those that are behind book banning have been heard. And so there were so many kids we spoke with, and it was really hard to not put them all in the film. They all had such profound things to say. So that was tough because we had a limited amount of time. And it was also really important to us to really bring the books to life for people through the different montages, through animation and through our recording excerpts from the books, because people would just see the cover and say, oh, that's what it's about. But we spent a lot of time really focusing on the content of the books and highlighting the very thing for why it was being banned, so that the audience knew right away, oh, I see. That it's because they're questioning Jesus, or because there's a book called Dim Sum for Everyone that's about dim sum. It was banned, like the most ridiculous things. And so we spent a lot of time selecting which books, so that those books would reflect the different communities being impacted by the bans. And there were some concerns by the right. We were concerned about they're attacking us, and they have been doing that to a degree. As Grace is such a model of inspiration for so many of us, at 101, if she can stand up and say, this is not acceptable, and what book banning can lead to for all of us, how could we not take the challenge and not take the risk of people, attacking us and doing things to us? So there were a lot of different layers, and creative opinions, but we really ultimately wanted to make a lyrical poem that represented this issue in a new way that wasn't a typical investigation piece.
We had a similar issue in terms of length and wanting to try to figure out how to fit all these stories into a short. I think maybe one of the most challenging things was actually the end credit sequence. We submitted the film into Telluride, and we got in just with the normal credit roll. And Ben and I had always talked about this idea of finding a way to get a physical representation of all these generations into the same space and have this celebratory ending. And so we had about 5 or 6 weeks until we needed to deliver the DCP to Telluride. And so we're we have to try to figure out if we could do this, essentially. And we called Peter Rotter, who introduced Ben and I. He's an incredible contractor here in LA, and he is playing clarinet in the film as well. And he helped us put that together. But we talked to him about this idea of having an orchestra of people from 7 to 70, all from LAUSD, and would that be possible to get this 80-piece orchestra into a space? And he went to work on it right away, and then Ben and I went away to work on the piece, and I wrote the piece in a weekend with Ben and I sending voice memos back and forth, trying to figure out how we would, storyboard in our mind, and then I would write the piece based on our conversations around that. And then to record it, we had 3 hours to record this piece of music, and none of the musicians had seen it before. And so, to have these, I think that's what's so special about musicians in LA. I think, the greatest musicians around the world can play a piece of music when they see it. But I think here in LA, especially people that play on scores, they know how to put emotion into it, and they can play something like they've been playing it for years. And so it was so amazing to see, after the first few times of playing through it, that all of a sudden this piece was coming to life. And it was just amazing to see how all of these musicians connected on the fact that they all went to LAUSD schools, and they didn't even know that somebody else went to a school that they went to 15 years later and all that. And then we were also concerned about the cost of it, but we just, Ben and I put our own money into this up until the end. And that day was really special because each person came forward and said they would donate their time, because they also wanted to give back to this repair shop in that way. And the Warner Brothers donated the studio, so it ended up being this really. I think it doesn't feel difficult now because it felt like it just happened to all come together. But definitely going into it and during the day of filming it, that was by far probably the toughest day we had for sure.
That was the first time that they played that piece.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were not musicians who had ever played together before, obviously, because they're all from different walks of life. Yeah. That's magic. That's just magic. It must have felt like it in the room.
Yeah, 100%, definitely.
I think that's all the time we have. But anyway, thank you all for being here. Thank you for your films. Congratulations to all the nominees. And thank you for joining us here tonight. Thank you for your time.